Some boxes hold money, some hold jewelry, some hold old letters that no one reads anymore. But the black wooden box in Adrian Vale's study held something much worse. It held a family's unfinished truth. And truth, when locked away too long, does not die. It waits. It grows sharp in the dark. And one day, when the wrong hands lift the lid, it cuts through everyone. The night it began, rain pressed hard against the tall windows of Ashbourne House. The old estate stood on the hill like a proud man hiding a sickness. Its stone walls were beautiful, its gardens were perfect. Its chandeliers shone like stars trapped in crystal. But inside that house, almost every room had learned how to keep a secret. Adrian Vale stood alone in the blue study, one hand resting on the fireplace, the other holding a glass he had not touched. On the desk in front of him sat the box. Black walnut, silver lock, no mark except a faint scratch across the lid, like a scar. His father had given it to him 2 nights before he died. Gabriel Vale had been weak then, his voice thin, his hands trembling under the hospital blanket. But his eyes had still carried the same hard command that had ruled everyone in the family for years. "Promise me," Gabriel had whispered. Adrian had leaned closer. "What?" "Never open it." Adrian had frowned. "Then why give it to me?" His father had taken a slow breath, as if even that truth cost him pain. "Because some burdens belong to blood. Keep it, protect it. But do not open it. And if someone else does," Gabriel's eyes had moved to him with sudden fear, "then everything will fall apart." Adrian had wanted to ask more. He had wanted to know what could frighten a man like Gabriel Vale. But his father had turned his face toward the window and said nothing else. 3 hours later, he was dead. Since then, the box had stayed in the locked drawer of Adrian's desk, untouched, unopened, unwanted. And yet Adrian looked at it often, sometimes in the morning, sometimes after midnight, sometimes after he came back from places he should not have gone, places where the air smelled of expensive perfume and bad decisions, places where a woman named Sienna Cole smiled at him like she had already decided what part of his life she would take for herself. That evening, Ashbourne House was full of guests. A charity dinner was underway downstairs. People laughed too loudly under soft golden lights. Crystal touched crystal. Polite lies floated through the music. Adrian's wife, Elena Vale, moved among the guests with calm grace, wearing a dark green gown that made her look like she belonged to the house more than anyone else in it. She smiled when spoken to. She thanked donors. She greeted old partners. She did everything a perfect wife was expected to do. And yet, if anyone had really looked at her, they would have seen how tired her eyes had become. Not weak, not defeated, just tired. Tired of careful rooms, tired of careful words, tired of sharing a marriage with silence. There had been a time when Adrian and Elena had spoken easily. There had been a time when he had waited for her laughter. There had been a time when she could tell what mood he was in by the way he opened a door. But that had been years ago, before work became a wall, before grief shaped them into strangers, before he started disappearing on business trips that returned with the scent of another woman. Elena did not ask where he went anymore. Adrian did not explain. That, too, had become part of the marriage. A quiet ruin. Downstairs, Sienna Cole entered late enough to be noticed. She was not on the official guest list, but Adrian had made one call and a place had appeared for her. That was how life worked around him. Doors opened, names were added, Mistakes were softened. Sienna wore silver satin and confidence like skin. She was younger than Elena, louder than Elena, sharper than Elena, and she knew it. When she smiled at Adrian across the room, it was not the smile of a woman hiding. It was the smile of a woman getting tired of being hidden. Elena saw it. She saw many things. The half-second pause in Adrian's breath. The way Sienna's hand stayed on his arm too long. The small burn of humiliation that rose in her chest. Not because she did not know, but because tonight neither of them had cared enough to be careful. Still, Elena said nothing. She only lifted her glass, answered a question from a board member, and kept standing. Because women like her learned early that dignity sometimes looked a lot like silence. Hours passed. Plates were cleared. Speeches ended. Rain kept falling. In the hallway outside the study, the housekeeper, Martha Green, spoke quietly with Daniel Cross, the family lawyer and current advisor to Adrian's company. Martha had worked at Ashbourne House for 32 years. She had seen births, funerals, affairs, drunk confessions, and broken promises. There was almost nothing left in the world that surprised her. Daniel, however, looked nervous. He always looked a little nervous, but tonight there was sweat at his collar. "I'm telling you," Martha said in a low voice, "the study should have been cleared after the old man died." Daniel glanced around. "Not here." "Then where? In church? In the garden?" "That box should never have remained in this house." Daniel's face tightened. "Keep your voice down." Martha folded her arms. "It was meant to stay closed. And it has. For now." Sienna passed the far end of the hall just as Martha said the words. She slowed. Not enough to make noise, just enough to listen. Daniel noticed movement and turned, but Sienna was already smiling at a painting on the wall, as if she had heard nothing. He moved away quickly. Martha went in the opposite direction, but the words stayed in Sienna's mind. A box. The study, meant to stay closed. For women like Sienna, curiosity was never just curiosity, it was hunger. And hunger always wanted to know what sat behind locked doors. Later, after the last guests had begun to leave, Sienna found Adrian alone near the back terrace. The rain had softened into a thin silver mist. He loosened his tie. She stepped close enough to smell whiskey on him. "You embarrassed your wife tonight," she said. He gave her a tired look. "You came without asking. You told me last week you were tired of pretending." "I said I was tired. That is not the same thing." He looked away toward the wet lawn. "Not tonight, Sienna. That's what you always say. This dinner mattered." She laughed once without humor. "Everything matters except me." "That's not fair." "No," she said quietly. "What isn't fair is keeping me in the shadows while your wife wears your name and your house and your future." Adrian exhaled slowly. "I told you this situation is complicated. It's only complicated because you keep choosing the easiest lie." He rubbed his forehead, already feeling the beginning of a headache. "Sienna, please. Do you love her?" The question hung between them. It should have had a simple answer. Maybe years ago it did. Now it felt like a wound no one wanted to touch. Adrian did not answer. And silence, in moments like that, was an answer of its own. Sienna's jaw tightened. Then, just as quickly, her expression softened. She reached out and adjusted his tie, fingers smooth against the silk. "Fine," she said. "Not tonight." He looked at her with relief he did not deserve. "I have an early meeting in town," he said. "I'll leave in 10 minutes." "I know." She kissed his cheek lightly, stepped back and smiled like peace. But inside, something had already changed. She was done waiting for this man to choose her out of kindness. If she wanted a future, she would have to force the truth into the room herself. And somewhere upstairs, in the locked blue study, a box sat in darkness like a loaded gun. Adrian went to change before leaving. He took off his jacket in the dressing room and laid it across a chair. In the inside pocket was the small brass key to his desk drawer. He did not think about it. He did not imagine that careful lives usually collapse over small forgotten things. Sienna waited 3 minutes after he left. Then she walked upstairs alone. Ashbourne House had long hallways that swallowed sound. Her heels clicked softly over polished wood. She passed old portraits with dark eyes. She passed the closed bedroom where Elena was speaking quietly on the phone to the caterer about a missing invoice. She passed a window where rain slid down the glass like tears on a face too proud to cry. At the study door, she paused. It was locked. Of course it was. She reached into the pocket of her wrap and took out the brass key she had slipped from Adrian's jacket with a soft hand and a smiling mouth. For a moment, even she hesitated, because some doors carry a strange feeling around them. Not fear, exactly, more like warning, as if the room itself knows what should stay buried. Then greed spoke louder. She unlocked the door and stepped inside. The study smelled of old paper, cedar wood, and cold ashes. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling. A green-shaded lamp cast a pool of light across the desk. The room felt untouched by time, as though Gabriel Vale might still walk in and find fault with the dust. Sienna crossed to the desk. Her pulse beat faster now. The first drawer was locked. She used the key. Inside, beneath business files and sealed envelopes, sat the box. Smaller than she expected. Heavier, too, when she lifted it out. The silver lock on the box itself was already open. That made her stop. Why would a man guard a thing so carefully and yet leave the box unlocked once inside the drawer? Unless the real lock was never the metal. Unless it was fear. Sienna placed the box on the desk. Her fingers moved to the lid. 1 breath, then 2. Then she opened it. The first thing she saw was not jewelry, not cash, not photographs of a secret child or a mistress from long ago. It was a letter, cream paper, sharp handwriting. 1 sentence written across the front. If this box is open, then silence has already failed us. Sienna frowned. Under the letter were bundles of papers tied with black ribbon, an old leather journal, a silver pocket watch, a sealed envelope marked for Adrian, another marked for Elena Ross, a thick file with legal stamps, and below all of it, a flash drive taped to the bottom with yellowing adhesive. Sienna felt the first taste of disappointment. This was not treasure. This was paper, old family paper, dead people's paper. Then she saw the file title on top. Ross and Vale, Original Partnership Deed. Her eyes sharpened. She took out the deed and spread it on the desk. 2 names signed at the bottom. Gabriel Vale, Thomas Ross, 51% ownership to Thomas Ross, 49 to Gabriel Vale. Sienna stared. Elena's maiden name was Ross. She knew that much. Everyone in their circle knew Elena came from a family that once had vineyards and then lost everything after her father's death. But Vale Cellars had always been spoken of as Gabriel's empire. Always. Sienna turned the page. There were handwritten notes, then a signed confession, not a copy, the original. Her mouth went dry as she read. Gabriel Vale admitted that after Thomas Ross died in the cellar collapse 26 years earlier, he had hidden the true partnership deed. He had bribed an inspector to blame the accident fully on Thomas's negligence. He had pressured Thomas's widow into signing false debt papers. He had used the dead man's formulas, his land rights, and his majority share to build what became Vale Cellars. Every line made the room colder. Sienna sat down slowly. "Oh my God," she whispered. The next papers were worse. There were letters from Adrian's mother, Nora Vale, to Gabriel. They were full of grief and disgust. "I know what you stole from that family. Elena was only a child. You are building a house on a grave." There was another letter, this one to Adrian. Sienna hesitated, then opened it too. Nora's handwriting again. "My son, if this reaches you, then your father has chosen fear over justice for the last time. I begged him to return what belonged to the Ross family. He refused. If you learn the truth, do not repeat his sin. Do not keep a good woman trapped inside a lie, because it is convenient for the men who benefit from it." Sienna read the line twice. A good woman. Elena, not her. There were tears in the edges of the ink, as if Nora had cried while writing it. Then Sienna opened the envelope marked for Elena Ross. Inside was a second statement signed by Gabriel and notarized, but never filed. It transferred Ashbourne House and controlling shares of the company back to Elena upon public disclosure of the original fraud. There was also one note in shaking handwriting. "I stole your father's future. This house should never have carried only my name." Sienna sat back, heart pounding. This was not just family scandal. This was power. This was ownership. This was the kind of truth that could blow a marriage apart, bring lawyers running, destroy a company, and put Elena, not Adrian, in control of everything. For a few seconds, Sienna forgot to breathe. Then something darker rose inside her. If Elena learned this, Elena would not be thrown out. Elena would become stronger, untouchable, legitimate. The wife would become queen. And Sienna would remain what she had always been to the house, to the servants, to society. And maybe even to Adrian. Temporary. Disposable. No. She would not allow that. She took out her phone and began taking photographs. Every page, every signature, every confession, every letter. Her fingers moved quickly. By the time she reached the flash drive, she was shaking. She plugged it into the laptop on the desk. There was one video file. She clicked play. Gabriel Vale appeared on screen, older, heavier, tired. He sat in what looked like this very study. The timestamp showed it had been recorded 6 months before his death. He looked straight into the camera. "If you are watching this, then I have run out of courage." Sienna stared as the dead man spoke. He confessed everything. The theft, the forged papers, the pressure placed on Elena's mother. The fact that Adrian had never been told the full truth, but had been pushed into marrying Elena in part so the Ross claim would remain inside the family, quiet and controlled. Not forced, not directly, but steered, managed, arranged with the cold hands of older people who believed love could be replaced by strategy. Then Gabriel said the line that changed the entire shape of Sienna's face. "Adrian may tell himself he knew nothing. That will not be fully true. He knew enough to ask questions. He chose not to ask. That silence is his share of the guilt." The video ended. For a long moment, only the rain made noise. Sienna slowly removed the flash drive. Now she understood. Adrian was not innocent. Maybe not fully guilty, but not innocent. And that meant he was weak, and weak men could be moved. She put everything back with care, except for the photographs on her phone and the flash drive she slid into her bag. Then she closed the box, returned it to the drawer, locked the desk, and left the room. When she closed the study door behind her, her reflection caught in the dark glass of the hallway window. She looked pale, not afraid, excited, like a woman who had finally found the blade she needed. The next morning, Elena woke before sunrise. That had become her habit over the years. Early hours felt cleaner, safer. The house did not lie as much before breakfast. She tied a robe around herself and went downstairs to the small morning room overlooking the east garden. Martha was already there placing tea on the table. "You're up early," Elena said. Martha gave a small smile. "So are you." Elena sat. "Did Adrian come home?" "He did, very late. Where is he now?" "He left before dawn for the city." Elena nodded. "No surprise there." Martha poured tea with steady hands, but Elena noticed something restless in her face. "What is it?" Elena asked. "Nothing, madam." "Martha?" The older woman hesitated. "I dislike storms." Elena looked out at the wet glass. "The rain stopped." "Yes," Martha said softly, "but sometimes the worst weather comes after." Elena studied her but did not push. A few minutes later, after Martha left, Elena noticed a paper corner caught under the leg of the tea tray. She bent down and pulled it free. It was a photograph, old, slightly faded. A smiling woman stood in front of Vineyard Rose with a young girl at her side. On the back was written, "Nora and Elena summer at Ross Hill." Elena felt her chest tighten. Nora was Adrian's mother. She had died years ago. Elena had met her only a few times as a teenager. Kind eyes, quiet sadness. But Ross Hill was her father's land, and no one had called it that in decades. Why was this photograph upstairs? Why now? She turned it over again and again. Then she stood. Without fully knowing why, Elena walked out of the morning room, down the long corridor, and up to the blue study. The door was locked. She touched the brass handle. Cold. For a moment she stood there with the photograph in her hand, feeling as if the house itself were holding its breath. Then she turned away. If there was one thing years of marriage had taught her, it was this. A locked door in a rich man's house always had a story behind it, and stories, sooner or later, leaked under the frame. By noon, Adrian was in Daniel Cross's office overlooking the river. The city below moved with its usual confidence. People in suits, cabs, phones, screens, deals, normal life. But Adrian felt unsettled in a way he could not explain. He had barely slept. Sienna's face from the terrace stayed in his mind. Not her words, her eyes, the sharpness in them, like she had made a decision without him. Daniel pushed a folder across the desk. "Board vote is next week. We need stability until then." Adrian nodded absently. "Are you listening?" Daniel asked. "Enough." Daniel leaned back. "You don't seem yourself." Adrian almost laughed at that. What self? The one that signed papers? The one that kissed a woman in apartments he did not own? The one that came home to a wife he no longer knew how to speak to? Instead, he said, "Just tired." Daniel tapped the folder. "Then let me be clear. No scandals, no headlines, no drama. Investors are already nervous about the expansion." "Since when do you sound like a priest?" "Since I began cleaning up after powerful men who think consequences belong to poorer people." Adrian looked at him. "Meaning?" "Meaning, keep your private life private." Before Adrian could answer, His phone lit up. Sienna. He stared at the name, then declined the call. A second later, a message appeared. "We need to talk now, not later. Now." His chest tightened. He wrote back. "In a meeting." Her reply came instantly, "Then leave it. I know about the box." Adrian froze. Daniel noticed the change in his face. "What happened?" Adrian stood too fast, chair scraping the floor. "I need to go." Daniel rose as well. "What do you mean, go?" Adrian was already reaching for his coat. "Something's happened at the house." He left before Daniel could stop him. By the time Adrian reached Sienna's apartment, rain had started again. Not heavy, just enough to blur the city and make every window look guilty. She opened the door before he could knock twice. She was barefoot, wearing a cream blouse and dark trousers, as if she had dressed carefully for war. "What did you do?" Adrian asked. "No hello." He stepped inside. "What did you do?" She walked to the table in the center of the room. On it were printed photographs, documents, letters, the confession, the deed, the envelope marked for Elena. Adrian stared as all the blood seemed to leave his body. He picked up one page, then another. "No. Yes. You opened it. You should have opened it years ago." He looked at her with something close to horror. "You had no right." She laughed, soft and bitter. "No right? That's rich coming from a family that built itself by stealing another family's life." Adrian threw the papers down. "You don't understand." "I understand perfectly. Your wife owns half your world, maybe more. Your father knew it. Your mother knew it. Your lawyer probably knew it. And you," she stepped closer, "you knew enough to look away." He said nothing, because that part was true. Not the details, never the details. But there had always been things in the house that did not fit. Old tension when Elena's father's name came up. Nora's sadness around Elena. Gabriel's strange insistence on the marriage when Adrian was still young and not ready. He had suspected old business ugliness. He had chosen not to dig. Silence had been easier. Sienna saw that truth land in him and pressed harder. "So here's what will happen," she said. "You will tell Elena everything. You will tell the board you are stepping aside. You will divorce her, publicly, cleanly. And you will stop treating me like a secret." He stared at her. "That's what this is. This is me refusing to drown with your lies. You think exposing this gives you a future? It gives me a chance. With what? A man whose life just exploded? With the truth, Adrian, for once." He shook his head. "You don't care about truth." "No," she said. "I care about not being the fool anymore." He ran a hand over his face. "Give me the flash drive." She folded her arms. "No. Sienna. No." He stepped toward her. "You have no idea what this can do." She held his gaze. "Then maybe you should have thought of that before you asked me to keep waiting while you slept beside another woman." He stopped. Her voice cracked on the last word. Not much. Just enough for him to hear the injury beneath the rage. But whatever tenderness he might once have had was already drowned by panic. "You need to give me everything," he said. She smiled sadly. "Too late, I made copies." Adrian left her apartment feeling as if the ground under the city had shifted. Back at Ashbourne House, Elena waited in the small library with the old photograph on the table between her hands. When Adrian entered, wet from the rain, she rose. "Where did this come from?" she asked. He looked at the photo and went still. For one dangerous second, he thought of lying. A trivial lie. A small one. Something about storage boxes, old albums, Martha cleaning. But then he remembered the papers spread across Sienna's table, the dead voice of his father on the screen, his mother's letter. Silence has already failed us. He sat down heavily. Elena, where did it come from? He looked up at her. The study. Her expression changed, not yet with knowledge, but with instinct. What is in that room? A history I should have uncovered a long time ago. She did not sit. Do not speak to me in riddles. He closed his eyes for a moment. There is a box. A box. Yes. And it contains documents. About your father. About mine. About the company. Her face lost color slowly, like a sky before a storm. What kind of documents? He forced the words out. Proof that Vale Cellars was never only my family's. She stared at him. He continued, hating himself with each line. Your father, Thomas Ross, held the majority stake in the original partnership. After he died, my father hid the deed. He altered records. He forced your mother to sign papers she should never have signed. Elena's lips parted, but no sound came. Adrian stood now, desperate to speak before courage failed again. There's more, a confession, transfer documents. My mother knew. I think she tried to push him to make it right. You think? Elena said. Her voice was low and strange. He swallowed. I only learned the full truth today. The full truth? Yes, but not nothing. The words hit him harder than if she had shouted. Because again, that part was true. He had not known. But he had known enough. He had seen shadows and chosen comfort. He said quietly, no, not nothing. Elena took one step back, then another. Her eyes had become very clear. You married me under this roof, she said. You put my father's name on no wall. You let me host dinners in a house that should never have belonged only to your family. You watched me thank people for a legacy built on stolen ground. He tried to answer. Elena, I did not know. She cut him off. Do not say that to me if it is not clean truth. He stopped. She looked at him for a long time. Then she asked the question he feared most. Why did your father want you to marry me? The room went silent. Adrian felt it then. The final door inside himself, the one he had kept shut with excuses. My father believed, he said slowly, that if the Ross name returned through marriage, no one would ever challenge the old transfer. It would all remain contained. Elena's face changed. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a deep inward breaking. So I was a solution. No, he said quickly, not to me. But at the start, perhaps. He could not answer fast enough. And that was answer enough. Elena nodded once, very small, very controlled. Then she picked up the old photograph from the table. When were you going to tell me? I am telling you now. When were you going to tell me, she repeated, if someone else had not opened that box? He said nothing, because they both knew the answer. Never. She walked past him and out of the library. He followed. Elena. She stopped at the door but did not turn. Do you know what hurts most? She asked softly. He waited. It is not that your father stole from mine. Dead men are capable of many cowardly things. It is not even that you had an affair. I learned to smell that betrayal before I learned its details. What hurts most is this. Some part of you always knew there was rot under this house, and you still let me call it home. Then she left. Martha found Elena an hour later in the old glass conservatory behind the east wing. The room was filled with rain light and the smell of wet earth. Elena stood among potted lemon trees, arms wrapped around herself, not crying. Martha closed the door behind her. So, Elena said without looking up. You knew too. Martha did not insult her with denial. Yes. For how long? Not everything. Enough. And you said nothing. I was a servant in this house before I was an old woman with opinions. I told myself silence kept people fed. Elena gave a hollow laugh. Everyone kept telling themselves a noble version of cowardice. Martha stepped closer. Your mother knew some of it. Elena turned sharply. What? Not the full papers, not the confession. But she suspected Gabriel stole from Thomas after the accident. She was sick, frightened, in debt, and grieving. He cornered her through lawyers. She signed things she barely understood. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth. Martha continued, voice rough now. Nora Vale hated it. She tried to help in small ways, school fees, medical bills, quiet support. But she never found the courage to expose Gabriel publicly. She feared what it would do to Adrian. Elena closed her eyes. So much damage, so many soft, polite failures. Martha reached into her apron pocket and took out a folded note. Nora gave me this years ago, she said. She told me if the truth ever surfaced, and you stood alone, I was to place this in your hand. Elena took it. The paper was old. She unfolded it carefully. It said only this. You were never the debt. You were the wrong child. Please do not confuse the two. Elena read it twice. Then for the first time that day, tears came. Not loud, not helpless, just quiet tears falling straight down, like something finally released after too many years of being held. That night, Sienna made her next move. She had not opened the box to sit and wait. Pain had taught her long ago that if you wanted space in powerful people's lives, you either demanded it or you disappeared. She refused to disappear. She called Daniel Cross and asked for a private meeting. He agreed, though his tone was sharp. They met in a hotel lounge on the edge of the city where rich people like to conduct ugly business behind expensive flowers. Daniel arrived 10 minutes late and sat without greeting. What do you want? He asked. Sienna slid one printed copy of Gabriel's confession across the table. Daniel looked down. His face lost blood so fast it was almost impressive. Where did you get this? She smiled. Wrong question. He looked around before lowering his voice. Do you have any idea what this is? Oh, I know exactly what it is. Daniel's fingers tightened on the paper. Who else has seen it? Again, she said lightly. Wrong question. He stared at her. She leaned in. I'm tired of being treated like a passing inconvenience. Adrian is going to end his marriage, publicly, cleanly, and you are going to make sure the transition in the company protects him. Daniel almost laughed. You delusional girl. Careful. No, you be careful. These documents do not make you powerful. They make you disposable. Her smile faded. Meaning? Meaning, if this comes out, Adrian falls, the board panics, lawsuits begin, the Ross claim reopens, and everyone around the mess gets crushed, including you. She sat back. So, help me control it. Daniel's eyes hardened. You think I take instructions from a mistress? The word burned. Sienna kept her face still. I think, she said, you take instructions from the person holding dynamite in a dry room. For a second, they only stared. Then Daniel did something she did not expect. He relaxed, not fully, just enough to become dangerous in a different way. How much? He asked. She blinked once. Excuse me? How much money buys your silence? Her cheeks went hot. You think I came here for money? I think everyone comes here for something. I came here because I'm tired of being lied to. Daniel folded the confession back toward himself. Then let me offer you a better truth. Adrian will never choose you in public if this turns ugly. Men like him cling hardest to legitimacy when everything shakes. You expose this and he runs to the wife, not the mistress. The words hit with cruel precision. Sienna rose. You're wrong. Daniel remained seated. Am I? She took the paper back from him and placed it in her bag. You'll find out. Then she walked away before her hands could start shaking. By morning, 2 envelopes had been sent, one to a business journalist known for tearing polished families open, one to Elena Vale. At breakfast, the envelope waiting beside Elena's plate had no return name. She opened it slowly, expecting charity requests or event proofs. Instead, she found copies of 3 pages, the original deed, part of Gabriel's confession, and Nora's line. Do not keep a good woman trapped inside a lie because it is convenient for the men who benefit from it. Elena did not move for several seconds. Then she stood, left the untouched tea, and walked directly to Adrian's office. He was there. He had not gone to the city. Perhaps some part of him knew it was too late to leave the house today. She placed the papers on his desk. Did you know these were sent to me this morning? She asked. Or should I add that surprise to the list? He looked at the pages and swore under his breath. So you didn't. She sent them. Sienna. He said the name like a confession of another kind. Elena stared at him. You said the full truth came yesterday. Apparently it travels faster. I'm trying to handle this. She laughed once, cold and brief. Handle it? Adrian, I am the daughter of the man your father robbed. This is not a leaking pipe. It is my life. He stood. I know. Do you? He moved around the desk, but she stepped back. Don't, she said. Not with those hands. I don't know what they've held lately, and I don't know what they've hidden for years. He stopped where he was. Tell me everything, she said. He did. Not smoothly, not nobly. He told her about Gabriel's last warning, about the box, about Sienna opening it, about seeing the papers, about the video confession, about the line that said he had known enough to ask and had chosen not to. He even told her that, yes, at the start, his father had encouraged the marriage because it kept the Ross name close and harmless. Elena listened without interrupting. When he finished, the room felt stripped. You loved me once, she said quietly. It was not a question. He answered just as quietly. Yes. And then? He looked down. Then I became my father's son in all the ways I hated. The honesty of it almost made her cry again. Almost. But grief had moved past tears and into clarity. She nodded toward the door. Leave this room. Elena, leave this room before I remember every year I defended you to myself and hate myself for it too. He left. Not because he wanted to, because he finally understood he had no right to remain. By midday, the story broke. The headline appeared first on a business site, then another, then another. Vale Cellars, faces, historic fraud claim. After dead founder's confession emerges, widowed partner's heir may hold legal claim to Ashbourne. Estate, private letters, raise questions about Vale family marriage. Phones began ringing across 3 cities. Board members called. Investors called. Old rivals called pretending concern. Adrian's office line became useless. Daniel sent 5 messages in 20 minutes. The public relations team requested an emergency statement. A banker canceled a lunch. A board member resigned by email before anyone could ask his opinion. In the servants' corridor, staff whispered. In the town below the hill, people began sharing the article, with the particular joy the world reserves for powerful people when they begin to bleed. And in the center of it all sat Ashburn House, no longer grand, no longer untouchable, just exposed. Sienna watched the headlines rise from her apartment with a glass of white wine in hand. This was not exactly how she had planned it. She had wanted pressure. She had wanted Adrian cornered into choosing. She had wanted the wife shaken, not crowned with sympathy. But once Daniel tried to buy her, and once Adrian tried to frighten her, something inside her had snapped. If they all thought she was beneath the family, then fine. She would drag the family into the dirt where they could see her clearly. Her phone rang. Adrian. She answered. "What have you done?" he said. No greeting, just rage. Sienna looked out at the gray city. "You're on every site. Congratulations, you're finally public." "You leaked it. You had your chance. You didn't just expose my father, you exposed Elena." A strange silence followed. Then Sienna said, "That's what angers you most?" "Yes." She closed her eyes. Of all the answers she had expected, that was not the one. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. "Then maybe this should have happened a long time ago." She hung up. For the first time since opening the box, she did not feel victorious. She felt hollow. Because ruin, once released, did not move in a straight line. It struck everyone. Elena spent the afternoon with her own lawyer, Miriam Holt, in the West sitting room. Miriam was one of those women who entered a room as if nonsense had no permission to exist in front of her. She reviewed the papers with fast, exact eyes. "This is real," she said. "If originals are preserved, we can file immediately." Elena sat very still. File for what? For recognition of the original Ross majority stake, fraudulent transfer, control rights over the estate, and temporary protection against asset movement. Elena almost laughed. She had spent years arranging flowers for charity tables. And now strangers were explaining that half the world around her might legally belong to her family's buried name. "What if I don't want a war?" she asked. Miriam looked up. "With respect, you are already in one. You just didn't start it." Elena turned that over in her mind. It was true. She had not started this. Her father had not started it. Even her mother, in all her frightened weakness, had not started it. The war had begun the moment a man decided another dead man's future was more useful in his own pocket. "I don't want revenge," Elena said finally. "Good," Miriam replied. "Revenge makes people sloppy. Justice is cleaner." Elena let out a slow breath. "Martha has the original box location," she said. "Adrian saw it. Sienna saw it. Daniel may know more. I want everything secured." Miriam nodded. "Then we move now." As the lawyer gathered the papers, Elena looked out at the wet lawn. She remembered being 10 years old and hearing adults whisper after her father died. She remembered her mother staring at bills too long. She remembered Nora Vale sending school books one year and pretending they came from a scholarship fund. So this was what had been underneath it all. Not charity, not kindness, guilt. How strange, she thought. The truth could make your whole life rearrange itself in one day. At 4 p.m, Adrian and Elena saw each other again. Not alone. Miriam was present. Daniel arrived 5 minutes later, pale and controlled. When he entered and saw Elena seated at the head of the long table, something in his face shifted. Good, she thought. Let him feel the room changing. Miriam began without softness. We are preserving all original materials, filing an immediate claim, and requesting a freeze on relevant company actions. Daniel looked at Adrian. You brought her a shark, Elena answered for him. No, your choices did. Daniel sat. This can still be managed privately. Miriam almost smiled. By managed, I assume you mean hidden. Daniel ignored her. Public scandal helps no one. It helped your client for years, Elena said. He turned to her. I am not your enemy. She held his gaze. Were you aware of the original deed? Daniel hesitated one fraction too long. Miriam wrote something down. I asked, Elena said, whether you knew. Daniel straightened. I knew there were unresolved historical irregularities. Elena's expression did not change. That is a rich man's phrase for theft. Adrian looked at Daniel sharply. How much did you know? Daniel gave him a hard stare back. Less than your father. More than your wife. About as much as you chose to ask. The words landed like a slap. Adrian stepped forward. Answer me. I knew enough to keep the company protected, Daniel said, which is more than I can say for anyone in this house right now. Miriam closed her folder. Meeting over. Daniel rose. Be careful, Elena. If you push this publicly, the company may collapse before any judgment restores a share. She looked at him steadily. Then let it collapse in truth. I have lived too long in its polished lie. After he left, Adrian remained. Miriam tactfully stepped away to take a call. The room finally belonged to husband and wife, though the words no longer fit. Elena, Adrian said, if you do this, the board will come after you hard. She did not answer at once. When she did, her voice was almost gentle. Adrian, they have been coming after my family for 26 years. They simply did it with better manners. He closed his eyes. There was nothing left to defend, only consequences left to face. That evening, the front gates of Ashbourne House filled with cameras. Not many, not at first. 3 vans, a few reporters, then more. They waited for a statement, for a face, for a crack in the curtains. This was how public punishment worked now. Not with torches, with lenses. Martha instructed staff not to engage. Lights were dimmed in the front rooms. Meals were carried through side corridors. The house became a castle under siege. Sienna arrived just after dark. Not through the gates, through the side road. She parked near the old stable line and entered using a service path she had learned from Adrian months earlier. She found him in the West Hall, alone, jacket off, tie gone, looking as if 10 years had been added to him in a day. He turned when he heard her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he said, You should not be here. She laughed softly. That has never stopped either of us before. He took one step forward. Do you understand what you've done? Yes, she said. Do you? He looked at her with raw anger. Get out. Not until you say it. Say what? That you used me, that you hid behind me when your marriage felt dead, and behind your marriage when your courage failed. His jaw tightened. This is not the time. This is the only time. There may not be another. From the far end of the hall, Elena appeared. She had heard voices and followed them. When she saw Sienna standing in the light of the sconces with wet hair and defiant eyes, the final veil dropped. No suspicion now. No perfume on a collar, no lipstick on a glass. Just the woman herself inside the house. Elena walked toward them slowly. Sienna turned. For the first time that day, she looked uncertain. Elena stopped a few feet away. So, she said, you are real. Sienna lifted her chin. Yes. Elena looked at Adrian. and now she enters through side doors, while the truth enters through the front. He said nothing. Elena turned to Sienna. Did you send the documents? Yes. Why? Sienna took a breath. Because he never would have told you. Elena studied her for a long moment. That is true, but truth offered by a weapon still cuts. Something flickered in Sienna's face. Pain, perhaps, or shame. Elena continued. Did you expose this to free me or to replace me? The silence that followed was answer enough. Elena nodded once. I thought so. She walked past them both and continued down the hall without another word. Sienna watched her go, then whispered, She's stronger than you. Adrian turned on her. Leave. This time she heard that he meant it, so she left. But as the side door closed behind her, she knew something with cold certainty. He would not come after her tonight. He would not choose her. Daniel had been right about that. And some truths arrived too late to be useful. The next days blurred. Lawyers came and went, board meetings were moved, canceled, restarted. One news outlet published part of Gabriel's recorded confession, another found hospital records tied to Thomas Ross's accident and old inspection payments that should never have been made. Former employees began speaking anonymously. Whispers became timelines. Timelines became evidence. Daniel Cross tried to control the bleed, but once history smells weakness, it comes back hungry. Adrian stepped down from active leadership temporarily. No one believed the word. A lender paused funding. A planned expansion died overnight. The market value of Vale Cellars sank. Men who had toasted Adrian at his table 2 weeks before now called him a liability. He deserved some of it. Maybe all of it. But seeing it happen still felt like standing inside a house, while the beams cracked, one by one, overhead. At Ashbourne House, Elena moved differently now. Not louder, not harsher, simply steadier. As if each truth, though brutal, had returned one missing piece of herself. She read every file, every letter, every note. She watched Gabriel's video once, then once more. On the second viewing, she did not watch the dead man. She watched Adrian's father through Adrian's future. Power wrapped in fear. Control wrapped in polish. A man who thought silence was inheritance. Then she read Nora's letter to Adrian. The one hurt in a different place, because it proved something she had tried for years not to see. That there had always been a decent road available, and again, the men in that family had chosen the easier, wrong turn. One late afternoon, Adrian found Elena in the study. The box sat open on the desk between them. The room no longer felt forbidden, it felt exhausted. He stood at the door. May I come in? She looked up. It seems everyone else already has. He deserved that. He entered quietly. For a while, neither spoke. Then Adrian noticed the letter in her hand. Nora's note to him. You read it, he said. Yes. And? She placed it down carefully. Your mother understood something you did not. He accepted the blow. I know. She knew that truth delayed does not become kindness. It becomes rot. He nodded. I know that now, too. Elena looked at him. He seemed smaller in the study than he had ever looked anywhere else, not physically, morally. Like a man finally stripped of every room that once made him seem taller. You said you loved me once, she said. I did. And later? He answered without hesitation. I did later too, I just stopped acting like a man who deserved it. She let the words settle, then she asked, Why Sienna? He did not hide. Because she made me feel unjudged. Because with her, I could pretend I was not already failing somewhere else. Because I was weak, selfish, and angry at a life I had the privilege to fix and still kept mishandling. Elena's eyes did not soften, but they did become human again. Thank you for one honest sentence. He looked at the box. What are you going to do with the house? She answered slowly. I haven't decided. It's yours, if the filings hold. She gave him a strange look. You say that as though it costs you generosity. It was never yours alone to give. He breathed in, then out. You're right. It would have been easier if she had shouted, easier if she had broken things. But Elena had moved beyond rage into judgment. And judgment, Adrian was learning, lasted longer. A week after the scandal broke, Daniel Cross was served with a formal notice. Not only had the old fraud returned to life, but newer questions had surfaced. Off-book accounts, transfer shells, delayed disclosures. It turned out the past had not been the only crime hiding in polished drawers. Daniel had been moving money quietly for years under the shelter of the Vale name. Not always illegally, not always cleanly. And now the old confession had pulled enough light into the room for people to start checking corners. He called Adrian that night. Your wife has destroyed any chance of quiet settlement, Daniel said. Adrian sat in the dark study, looking at the empty fireplace. My wife didn't destroy that. Your choices did, and my father's, and mine. Daniel gave a dry laugh. Ah, so now we are confessing. I'm done protecting men who call theft irregularity. Careful, Adrian. Moral clarity looks cheap once your fortune is already on fire. Adrian spoke evenly. I should have opened the box the day my father gave it to me. Yes, Daniel said, but you didn't. Because men like us are raised to fear the cost of honesty more than the cost of corruption. The line stayed with Adrian long after the call ended. Men like us. He had spent years believing he was different from Gabriel, different from Daniel, different from the smiling cowards who built comfort on other people's losses. And yet difference that never acts is just vanity. He had not forged the deed. He had not written the confession. He had not pressure signed Elena's mother into ruin. But he had accepted the polished life built from it. He had asked too little, enjoyed too much, delayed too long. And maybe that was enough to damn a man. 2 nights later, Sienna made one final desperate choice. She learned through a driver she still knew that the original box had been moved from Adrian's desk to a secure cabinet in the study until Miriam could collect it with court officers the next morning. That meant tonight was the last night the originals were still inside the house. And if Sienna was honest with herself, she no longer even knew what she wanted. Control, revenge, protection, maybe all three. Part of her feared Daniel had more reason than anyone to make her disappear from the story. Part of her feared Adrian would survive this by surrendering nobly to Elena and leaving Sienna with all the filth of being remembered only as the mistress who opened the ruin. No, she needed leverage, real leverage. Originals mattered. So near midnight, she returned to Ashbourne House. The storm had come back stronger. Wind bent the trees. Rain hit the windows in hard sheets. The rear service door had not latched fully after a delivery earlier that evening. Martha would hate herself for that later. Sienna entered wet and fast, moving through the dark corridors with her heart pounding in her ears. She knew the house now. Which staircase creaked, which hallway stayed in shadow, which doors were alarmed and which were protected only by habit. She reached the study and froze. The door was already open. Inside, Elena stood at the desk with the box in front of her. A lamp burned low beside her. She turned as Sienna appeared. For a moment, both women simply stared at each other while thunder rolled somewhere over the hill. Then Elena said, "I wondered if you would come." Sienna swallowed. "Move away from the desk." Elena almost smiled. "You're late. I've already read everything. I'm not here for you." "No," Elena said. "You never were." Sienna stepped inside, water dripping from her coat. "I need the originals." "For what?" "To protect myself." Elena's gaze sharpened. "From Daniel?" Sienna said nothing. That, too, was an answer. Before Elena could speak again, another voice came from the doorway. "Leave the box." Adrian. He stood there soaked from the rain, breath hard, having seen a figure cross the back drive from his bedroom window. Sienna looked between them. The absurd shape of it nearly made her laugh. Wife, husband, mistress, storm. Secrets open on a desk. All because one dead man feared paper more than sin. "I'm taking it," Sienna said. "No," Adrian answered. She turned on him. "You don't get to command anyone anymore." He took a step forward. "You've done enough." "Enough?" Her voice rose. "Do you want to talk about enough? Enough lies, enough waiting, enough being touched in private and denied in daylight, enough pretending your marriage was already dead, so what we did somehow hurt no one." Elena stood still, but each word struck the room. Adrian's face tightened. "This isn't about us." "It is for me," Sienna snapped. "It has always been about us because while you were busy inheriting polished guilt, I was the one being asked to live in the dirt behind it. No one forced you to stay." She laughed in disbelief. "No one forced Elena to stay either, did they? Except history. Except money, except all the soft golden cages men build, and then call choice." The line silenced even Adrian. Because beneath the poison, there was truth, too much of it. Sienna looked at Elena now, really looked. "You think I wanted your life?" she asked. "I wanted not to disappear, that's all. I wanted one honest place to stand." Elena answered quietly. "Then why did you come for mine?" Sienna had no good answer. Only pain. Only ego. Only the terrible human habit of trying to solve one humiliation by passing it to someone else. She stepped toward the desk. Adrian moved fast, too fast. His hand caught her wrist. She pulled away. The box tipped, then fell. It struck the floor and burst open. Papers flew across the rug like startled birds. The silver pocket watch rolled under a chair. The flash drive skidded against the hearth. For one suspended second, all three of them stared at the scattered truth. Then Sienna said the words that finished Adrian completely. "Tell her," she said. "Tell her what your father admitted on that recording. Tell her you knew enough to ask and chose silence because comfort tasted better than justice." Elena turned slowly to Adrian. Thunder shook the glass. He did not deny it. He could not. "Yes," he said. The words seemed to empty the room. "Elena, I didn't know the deed. I didn't know the signed transfer. I didn't know the full confession. But I knew there was something wrong. I knew my father behaved as if your name inside this family solved an old danger. I knew my mother was uneasy. I knew enough to ask, and I chose not to." Elena's face did not break. It hardened into the shape of final understanding. "Why?" he answered in a voice so stripped it barely sounded like his own. "Because I was afraid the life I had would change. Because if I opened the box, I might have to become a better man immediately. and I preferred the comfort of not knowing every detail. The honesty came too late, but perhaps that was the point of tragedy. People often become fully honest only after dishonesty has already eaten the useful years. Sienna's anger drained at once. Hearing him say it out loud did not heal her. It only made everyone smaller. Elena bent slowly, gathered the envelope addressed to her, and placed it back inside the box. Then she looked at Sienna. "You wanted this house to crack," she said. "Well done, it has." Sienna's mouth opened, then closed. Elena turned to Adrian. "And you. I think this is the first time I have heard you speak without hiding. It would have saved us both if it had happened 5 years ago." He took a step toward her. She raised one hand. "No, not tonight." Then she walked out of the study with the box in her arms. Not hurried, not dramatic, just done. The next month was not a clean ending. Real collapse never is. It came in filing, statements, meetings, signatures, departures, account reviews, and 1,000 small humiliations. Daniel Cross resigned before investigators could force the gesture. Then the investigators came anyway. 2 board members attempted to distance themselves from old approvals. It did not help. News cycles moved on and returned and moved on again. That is what modern ruin does. It trends, cools, then lives forever in search results. Adrian gave a public statement at last. No excuses, no dramatic innocence. He acknowledged the historical fraud, his failure to pursue the truth sooner, his personal misconduct, and his support for the Ross claim. Commentators called it strategic. Maybe some part of it was. But Elena, watching from the far end of the sitting room, could tell something else, too. For once, he was tired enough to stop shaping himself for applause. The court granted temporary protection over Ashbourne House and key company holdings while claims were reviewed. Miriam moved with efficient force. Original documents were authenticated. Old signatures matched. Gabriel's confession was confirmed. Nora's letters added weight, though not legal effect. And piece by piece, the world Gabriel Vale had built as a monument to control began being redistributed under the hand of truth. Sienna disappeared from public view. Not fully. Rumors placed her in Milan, then Paris, then a rented house outside Brighton. None were confirmed. One afternoon, however, she requested a meeting with Elena through Miriam. Elena almost refused, then accepted. They met in a quiet hotel lounge with no cameras and too much silence. Sienna looked thinner, not glamorous, not broken, just worn down into something more real. Elena sat across from her and waited. Sienna spoke first. "I didn't ask to apologize," she said. "I assumed not." A sad smile touched Sienna's mouth. "Fair. Then why are we here?" Sienna looked at her hands. "Because I wanted to tell you I did not leak the final account files. Daniel did that himself when he thought the board would bury him. I sent the first documents, not the rest." Elena studied her. "Why does that matter to you?" "Because I've already done enough damage without carrying what isn't mine." Elena let the silence sit between them. Then she asked, "Did you ever care for him?" Sienna laughed softly, tired. "More than he deserved. Less than I told myself." "And what did you want from him?" Sienna answered after a moment. "A place. A chosen place, not borrowed time." Elena nodded. That, at least, she understood. Sienna looked up. "I know what I did to you. Yes. I thought if the truth exploded, I could shape the pieces." "You cannot shape an explosion," Elena said. "You can only survive where it throws you." Sienna absorbed that. Then she said quietly, "For what it's worth, When I read those papers, the first thing I felt wasn't triumph. It was rage that all of us had been living inside old men,